Joining us now is Pete Fiutak, publisher of College Football News, contributor for USA Today Sports. He's on the Deseret First Credit Union hotline. Pete, nice to have you back on the show.
Hey, what's going on? How you doing?
Really well. Let's start with our Twitter question today, Pete. Just in your terms of being a competitor and a college football guy, if you were the athletic director at BYU, would you schedule more the route that BYU is going now, or would you go back to kind of a Boise State model, bring back a few of those tough games, and try and go 11-1 or 10-2 against an easier schedule?
Well, here's not to answer your question with a question, but what's the point? Like, what's your goal with all this? Is it to go play in the college football playoff? Is it, to win a national championship potentially, or is it to make a lot of money? I mean, because it's more than just, as a fan, of course, play all the Power 5 teams you can, make it a national schedule, and it's a whole lot of fun when you schedule the big boys like that, especially with the first half of the season like BYU's been able to do. I do like the idea, if you're thinking about from a competitive standpoint, that if you're going to play a lot of tough big-name teams, you front-load it. Like, last year's schedule didn't turn out to be a killer, but if you looked at it before the season, there was, no way that, Michigan State and, Mississippi State, all these great teams that were on the schedule, there was no way BYU was going to get through that. It turned out the schedule wasn't as bad as you thought, but it wasn't BYU's fault. But that was all on the front end. Same thing for this year, and then you got the relative easy guys in the back end. So it works out great. But, again, what are you going for? Like, are you trying to the only way BYU gets in the college football playoff is if it goes undefeated or if it has one really tight loss to an amazing team.
Yeah.
But other than that, that's it.
Well, and the other part, we were looking at what Boise State has done, and, we're obviously comparing the scheduling model that BYU is doing versus Boise State. But in recent years, what Boise State has done has not necessarily meant that they've gone to this upper echelon bowl. I mean, they've done the same thing in terms of how they've scheduled, but it hasn't paid off like it had in the past recently.
Well, it did a couple of years. They're only 2 years removed from beating Arizona in the Fiesta Bowl, and they would have probably gone. Last year they wouldn't have because Western Michigan was obviously a dominant force. But if they win the Boise State, if it wins the Mountain West, more likely than not, it's probably going to be right there front and center in the mix for that New Year's Six bowl game. But again, and saying this as a college football guy here, so what? Okay, you're in, Western Michigan got in the Cotton Bowl last year. And it's nice. It's a big moment. But again, it's an exhibition game. What's the point? Like, other than you get another big game on the schedule, which is all right. But if you're BYU, you've got to go at least 11-1 to get one of those games. And then that's not like I heard you kind of bring up the West Coast Conference and, the idea of Gonzaga before. Well, you're not getting into a tournament. You're not getting into the NCAA tournament. You're getting into an exhibition game. So at that point, what's your point? So if you are Tom Holmoe and you're trying to figure out how am I going to figure this out, then why not just make the most money possible for your school and feed this brand as your intro said, you can watch and do and hear what you guys are doing everywhere. BYU is a national and even international program in a lot of ways, and you want to keep feeding this media. You want as much money as possible to make the most good matchups you can possibly get.
Pete Fiutak, College Football News and contributor for USA Today Sports, with us on BYU Sports Nation. I think that there is a very definitive ceiling for a group of 5 teams. And yeah, it's nice to get to one of those New Year's Six games, but there's nothing after that. At least BYU has an opportunity to do something bigger than that. And call me prideful, whatever, but I like that opportunity.
Not really. Remember, Houston had it. If they didn't gack last year against Navy and SMU, I know it's ifs and buts, but remember Midway, they had beaten Oklahoma. And they destroyed Louisville late in the season.
Okay.
And they've just been able to beat those teams that they were supposed to. And if they had gone 13-0, they'd have gotten in.
You think they would have gotten in?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Because look at their strength of schedule at that point. Okay, great. American Athletics not getting all that much love, but you would have had the resume win, a destruction of Oklahoma, which was even better than the final score looked, and an absolute dominant performance over Louisville. I think they would have gotten that call over Ohio State last year to get in one of those spots. So I think it's possible, but you have to beat those big boy teams. You've got to beat, Western Michigan beating Illinois and Northwestern wasn't going to be good enough.
Right.
You've got to have, some of those. I mean, those weren't just like wins; those were dominant performances over, the Big 12 champion and a team that was good enough, to be in the mix for the ACC title with a Heisman winner. Those are the type of wins you got to have as a Group of 5 program. So then, to your broader question, if you're BYU, does going back to the Mountain West help you, or are you going to hold out hope that the Big 12 is going to wake up and realize they need to expand? So then you got to try to figure out, okay, what's next in this whole thing, or realize, life as an independent from a business standpoint is probably a whole lot better than joining one of these conferences.
You wrote that the Big 12 needs BYU, and last year, most Cougar fans just assumed that was the way it was going to play out. We know it did not.
It was a dog and pony show.
Do you believe that partnership will ever materialize?
It's got to, whether it's BYU or something. And the Big 12's got to expand. I mean, if you're looking at the way the media landscape is coming together now, the idea of, we got these, the ACC up their TV rights up until, 2034 or so. But you kind of joked before, and I was listening to you coming in, where you said, you got your YouTube channel here on BYU. Well, that's what the kids kids watch now. Yeah, that's what people watch. The idea of TV isn't going to be the same in 2030, whatever. It's not going to be the same 2 years from now. Everyone's going to be watching everything online. The entire scope of the media landscape is going to change. So the idea of having the right TV market is not going to matter necessarily as much as having the right reach on the internet. And again, that's where BYU having that national, international sort of thing, it is going to sort of help a conference like the Big 12, which has to expand its base. It's got to get bigger. It's got to figure out ways to generate more revenue. I don't know why they haven't taken UCF in South Florida to get their mitts into the Florida markets, and then go and expand to the West then and get BYU. And maybe, I don't know if Boise State's the right mix financially, but find one other team to make that a 14-team league.
Yeah, Houston or somebody. I just think that the Big 12 has to expand, or they're donezo in 2024. I think they're gone, and we're going to see 16-team super conferences, and the Big 12 is going to go bye-bye. What do you think about that?
It depends. It's going to be different. I think there's going to be a different landscape to what we're seeing. Eventually, I think Notre Dame's probably going to end this friends with benefits deal with the ACC and probably be a part of that. You're going to see different landscapes, again, based on media markets. I mean, right now, like the Big 12 and SEC are printing money because of their respective networks, but because they've got the big TV deals and they've got the reach in the big markets. Again, though, how is this going to translate to the internet? How is this going to translate to having the bigger fan bases? And again, I think it's more about enrollment, fan bases, and just the overall reach that you can get. And that's BYU's biggest attraction. I know there's always going to be the issues with someone in terms of, the religious identity is going to be an issue for some. There's going to be the problems of, how are the non-revenue sports going to mix in with the other sports? But from strictly a football standpoint and a fan base standpoint, it makes financial sense if you're thinking, let's think 10 years from now, what's the one kind of giant fan base that's out there that we know is going to watch and consume, and you probably see this in your own ratings and everything, it's going to consume everything BYU on the internet, and that's what these conferences are going to have to start looking at more.
Great stuff with Pete Fiutak, College Football News, USA Today sports contributor, and we will continue with that. Going back to what you wrote about BYU in your preview of all 4 college football independents. Speaking of BYU, you said for now, the route to choose independence is working. Why do you feel like it's working for BYU right now?
Money. It's just, again, revenue-wise. If you're looking at where the money's coming in, it's the biggest of the big schools and the SEC and Big Ten are just cash machines right now. So to join up with a Mountain West or even the Big 12 is just probably not going to be as financially suitable for BYU. When it comes to what they can take home, what they have to share, all the benefits that come with it. It's all right to be independent right now and not have to be a part of a conference. Now, from a competitive standpoint, I've gotten into this with BYU fans before. But again, what's the point of being an independent? Like, you're basically, unless you go undefeated, you're just playing a bunch of exhibition games. You're not playing for a conference title. There's no carrot at the end of the stick there for you. Maybe you'll get into, what this year you don't even have a bowl tie. You got to figure one out. Maybe you go to Las Vegas. Maybe you go to, San Diego for a bowl game. All right. But, other than that, it's just the fun of playing these bowl games. If you want to have, that one thing you can shoot for, maybe you want a Mountain West title. Maybe you want a Big 12 title. Then you think about conference alignments. But again, in terms of finances, in terms of freedom, being an independent's probably not that bad. Again, considering that BYU is this national, international program.
Looking at what BYU has schedule-wise this year, it's obviously a pretty daunting start with teams like LSU and Utah and Wisconsin, Boise State, Mississippi State. And you said that there's a chance for BYU to make some national noise, but it's all going to hinge on how they start. You said maybe having to go 6-1 to start. How likely do you believe that is?
Well, last year it didn't look like there was any possible shot of getting through that first part of the schedule without, just getting blasted. And obviously it didn't turn out to work that way. The defense is going to be fantastic. That linebacking core is among the best in the country. The offense just has to be able to rise up. The game I'm looking at more than anything else is that Wisconsin game. It's in Provo. That's one of those games where Wisconsin, if you look at the rest of Wisconsin's schedule, everything works out perfect. That's another team that last year had a brutal, brutal schedule to start the season. It didn't look like there was any hope that they'd be able to get through that. And sure enough, they were able to beat Michigan State and get right there in the mix of the college football playoff. Well, this year the schedule is a lot easier. BYU is their one really tough road game, and I think that's going to be the one that's going to get all the national attention.
Pete, great stuff. We always appreciate the time and the strong opinions. That's what we love to do in the offseason for college football. We look forward to your remaining articles, and remind people how they can find your stuff.
collegefootballnews.com. We're rocking and rolling. We got all 130 team previews up now, rankings, bowl projections, the whole sort of thing.
You got it, man. I hope you find time to sleep or at least eat some cereal or something in between all
At some point.
that stuff. Yeah. Thanks, Pete.
Have a good one, guys.